Hello, I'm Deborah Sword.
Hi, I'm Tyson Bankert. Deborah, we had a question that someone was asking. A sort of a Dear Deborah. And so I'm curious to know how we can maybe support this listener with some feedback. So I'll start us off here. My in-laws are driving me up the wall. My family of three hit a financial rough patch and had to move in with my partner's parents. There's always nitpicking my parenting style. Meanwhile, my partner can do the same thing and it's not challenged. He doesn't see a problem when I address this dynamic. I'm hurt as I thought we were all a lot closer. I feel shame for having to ask them for help. I know the in-laws love us and I'm grateful for their support. What tools can I use to manage the stress before it boils over?
Wow. Um, okay, just thinking about that quickly. So, first of all, I want to make a caveat. There's lots of emotions mentioned, which I'll remember and try to list for the purposes of conflict analysis. Conflict competence doesn't substitute for therapy or counseling.
Mm,
It's conflict competence. So when I notice emotions, it's to understand the conflict competence skills that would be useful, not to um,
right.
try. Yes, that's all. I'm not analyzing the person. So what I notice first is fear and shame about the financial situation, and then perhaps some anger and self-doubt from being criticized. I heard disappointment with the unsupportive partner and unfairness that your partner can do no wrong, but you can do no right, and
Mhm.
hurt that you aren't as close as you thought you were, and loss of power because you live in someone else's house, and gratitude. And I was glad to see gratitude to understand that everybody's trying to do their best. So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. One assumption is that you didn't discuss any conflict management plan before you moved in. So you didn't come to any kind of an agreement about, in the event that we have a conflict, we'll do this.
Mm,
Not having a conflict management plan going in doesn't make it too late to have the discussion now. You can do it now. You also don't say how old the third member of your family is, but I'll assume it's a child. It would be great to include the child at the table if it's age appropriate, which is does the child have language? If there's language skills, then this is an opportunity to model conflict competence skills for your child and with your child. So the question is, what tools? These are the ones that I think of, and Tyson, then I'm going to ask you to wade in. The first tool is listening. To create a conflict management plan now, there's going to be a series of steps, but the first skill is going to be listening. What would happen if you invited everyone to the table and asked how it's working for everyone? To frame the conversation as fine tuning a loving family relationship, and you want to improve the quality of the relationship and contribute yourself to that improvement. And then the skill is to listen fully to what everyone says. I've got a bunch more, but Tyson, did you want to add to listening?
yeah, I would think for the person in this really difficult situation, right? You summarize so many things that they could be feeling and what and how and the capturing of some of the conflict points, loss of power or feeling that this idea of comparison, right? Uh, and for me, I think it'd be really important to encourage sort of empathy building, right? Between I have had this loss, I can feel really you know shameful potentially for them to feel like they now have to rely on their in-laws and and that like how to help kind of create an environment of empathy. And then I think and from different and from different people, right? Whether that's the in-laws to your partner, right? So increasing that I think would be really important. And I would say creating really good boundaries as well is really helpful. That nitpicking, that was mentioned.
Okay, so that's getting to solutions, to hold
Mm.
that thought about boundaries, because we're going to get there. But I want to build on what you said about empathy. And just as you mentioned, check in with them. Did you, when you were listening and noting the emotions, the way I did when I came up with my list, then you check in with them. Did I understand you correctly? Did I get that right? And you'll ask them to correct you if you misunderstood anything. And after you've listened and made sure that you understand them correctly, then you're going to ask good questions. And that would be like, well, I heard you say whatever, and it makes me think that you feel this. And then again, make sure that they correct you. And to go with what you said about empathy, also vulnerability. So you're going
Mm.
to expose yourself to their feedback. Not only are you trying to understand what they want, but you're going to ask what you can do differently to improve the relationship from their point of view, and then accept the feedback non-defensively. And then, Tyson, you suggested boundaries. So, this is where we would start to get to solutions. Now that you've made sure everybody understands each other's point of view with empathy and vulnerability, then you're going to ask for suggestions. Tyson, you suggested boundaries. Where does that would come in around now?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be really important to address what we do now that we've heard, what everyone might need, or understand people's perceptions or point of views, to your point, Deborah. And from there, being able to that nitpicking piece that I mentioned or that they mentioned is clearly at least from the letter is a really driving wedge of conflict that's happening. And so being able to either to address your autonomy as a parent, but also living in their home, right? Those are overlapping uh, tension points, and I would be interesting to be able to start to create some of those solutions around what to kind of reduce the conflict and also be able to sort of say, I actually don't appreciate being nitpicked based on these things, and here's why. And then being able to hear what the in-laws in this particular dynamic also face. And then I think just one other thing is it would be interesting to also be able to have a really fulsome conversation with your partner, as it sounds like they're doing the same thing and not getting the same type of feedback. And so maybe having to readdress that is really important. That would be really helpful with that boundary setting as well.
And I would do that at the table with everyone there. So I agree with you, is they're looking for support from the partner, acceptance of the parenting style, fairness in how they and the partner are treated so that they aren't getting criticized for doing what others get away with. And the other thing I don't want to lose track of is they want love and closeness that they appreciate and are grateful for. So then you have to get into the specifics. So one of the things was you want your partner's support. So you have to be clear in your boundary setting. What does that support look like? How will your partner know if you're getting it? How will you know if you're getting it? And what will you do if you don't get it? What will happen? How will you approach that conversation? On the parenting style, you probably want to include uh, their parenting style and what happens if the styles are inconsistent. Does the child know the rules? And if the styles are inconsistent, does the child start to manipulate you going to whichever decision maker will be the most lenient?
Mhm.
Uh, for the criticism, the nitpicking, if something looks unfair, How will you raise it so it doesn't sound like you're being judgmental or whiny? And for the love and support, take it upon yourself. What events and activities will you put on so that you can all enjoy the closeness that you crave? And to let them know your thoughts about how your family of three is working towards being independent, uh, and listen to their ideas, because it sounds like you want this to be a temporary situation. So share what that will look like. And here's the other piece I want to just suggest. And
Mm,
again, it's going to be age appropriate, is to engage your child in decorating or designing the agreement and discuss what conflict competence looks like so your child has the foundation of quality relationships from a very early age. So this doesn't have to be one of those things that you whisper about where the child can't hear. Bring them in. Let them participate. You're never too young to learn conflict competence. Tyson, any last thoughts?
well, I just want to say thank you to the listener for asking this question because I think it's actually really hard to ask for advice or to ask for especially as we go older we get very stuck sometimes in our ways, and so being able to ask when things are challenging, it's really I really just pat that reader on the back for asking this question, and I hopefully there's some ways to navigate after hearing this.
And having a conflict management plan is always a good idea.
Great.
Thank you so much for the good question. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you'll like it, share it, and ask more good questions. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.